In early 2025, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued a stark warning that sent ripples through military circles. China's hypersonic missile fleet could potentially neutralize 10 U.S. aircraft carriers within the first 20 minutes of a conflict. This assessment hinges on several interlocking factors, chief among them the unparalleled speed, maneuverability, and stealth of hypersonic weapons. As the clock ticks down on this emerging threat, the urgent question becomes whether the United States can develop defenses quickly enough to avert a strategic catastrophe. Unlike traditional ballistic missiles, which follow a predictable arcing trajectory and become detectable as they descend toward a target, hypersonic missiles cruise at speeds exceeding Mach 5, 5 times the speed of sound, and can alter their flight path mid-course. This combination of velocity and unpredictability drastically complicates detection, tracking, and interception, effectively reducing the reaction time for defenders to mere moments. In essence, what was once an almost invincible seaborne fortress, the U.S. aircraft carrier now faces a very real and highly lethal threat. Current open-source analyses point to China's DF-17 medium-range ballistic missile as a leading example. The DF-17 carries a hypersonic glide vehicle capable of maneuvering during re-entry. Once launched, its booster propels the glide vehicle to high altitude. After separation, the HGV descends toward its target at hypersonic speeds, adjusting direction to evade defensive interceptors and maintain a low radar profile. China pairs these capabilities with shore-based anti-ship ballistic missiles, ASBMs, and supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, ASCMs, creating a layered threat environment. While precise U.S. estimates remain classified, Pentagon officials suggest that a salvo of roughly 15 DF-17s could overwhelm a carrier's point defenses, enabling at least a few warheads to hit their mark. This represents a seismic shift in naval warfare. Since World War II, aircraft carriers have been the foundation of U.S. power projection, acting as mobile air bases carrying fighters, electronic warfare jets, early warning planes, and helicopters for anti-submarine, rescue, and logistics missions. In conflicts from Korea and Vietnam to the Gulf War and Operation Enduring Freedom, carriers were often the first deployed assets, projecting air power without needing host nation basing. Their mobility, combined with escort ships, guided missile destroyers, cruisers, frigates, and submarines, created a protective bubble. Integrated air defense systems, long-range radars, electronic warfare suites, and rapid response jets make carriers virtually immune to conventional anti-ship threats. As a result, carriers became living symbols of American deterrence. China's growing anti-access/area denial, A2/AD network now undercuts carrier invulnerability. In the Western Pacific, multi-layered defenses include shore-based YJ-12 and YJ-18 supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, with ranges of several hundred kilometers, threatening carriers once considered safely distant. Type 039 A Yuan-class diesel-electric submarines patrol choke points, launching torpedoes and ASCMs while remaining quietly hidden, forcing carriers to commit escorts and divert resources. Naval mines, both bottom and influence types, lurk in key straits, where one strike can cripple an escort or carrier, forcing reroutes. Electronic and cyber warfare further degrades carrier defenses by jamming or spoofing command networks, complicating coordination and sortie direction. Integrated air defense systems, HQ-9 and S-400 batteries, extend inland, protecting missile brigades and making it harder for carrier aircraft to preempt launches. Once a carrier group approaches within roughly 1,000 nautical miles of China, whether in the East, South, or Yellow Seas, it becomes susceptible to intermediate and long-range strikes. The DF-17's 1,800 kilometers range covers most of the first island chain, Taiwan, Okinawa, Ryukyus. A coordinated salvo of DF-17s and other ASBMs creates a layered assault. Hypersonic glide vehicles arriving from high altitudes, ballistic missiles on predictable arcs, and supersonic cruise missiles attacking low. Faced with simultaneous warheads traveling at Mach 5 or higher from multiple vectors, the odds of at least one missile penetrating the defensive screen become unacceptably high. On a broader scale, China has invested in strategic partnerships and dual-use infrastructure along vital maritime routes to support its expanding naval presence. Port facilities in Pakistan's Gwadar, Sri Lanka's Hambantota, and Djibouti enable the plan to resupply ships far from its home BAS bases. These footholds not only enhance China's operational reach, but also provide forward logistics in any potential Indo-Pacific confrontation. Additionally, China's growing footprint in the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, through port agreements and joint naval exercises, signals a desire to challenge U.S. influence beyond the Western Pacific. This network of bases, combined with advanced A2/AD capabilities, signals an era in which Chinese planners envision denying U.S. forces unfettered access to the Western Pacific, even when thousands of miles from Chinese shores. The implications for American strategic posture are profound. For decades, carrier strike groups provided regional deterrence and reassurance to U.S. allies and partners. Their mere presence off a crisis zone deterred hostile actions by presenting a formidable and flexible strike capability. If, however, a carrier can no longer operate safely within a few hundred nautical miles of hostile shorelines, its warfighting utility diminishes. Carriers may be relegated to supporting roles further out to sea, relying on longer-range standoff platforms such as land-based bombers, submarines, or submarine-launched cruise missiles for initial strikes. This shift places a premium on Allied basing access. Forward bases in Japan, South Korea, and Australia would become even more vital for the United States to mount a credible deterrent. In practice, this could lead to increased political and diplomatic pressure on U.S. allies to host additional American forces or invest in complementary missile defense systems. The Department of Defense also emphasizes alliance cooperation. Forward arming and refueling points in Alaska, Guam, the Northern Mariana Islands, and potentially the Philippines would enable rapid deployment of fighters and unmanned systems deeper into contested areas, offsetting some loss of carrier reach. Even with these efforts, many analysts caution that no single solution can bulletproof carriers against hypersonic salvos. The nature of hypersonic threats, speed, maneuverability, and low signature, means defenders can be taken by surprise. Instead, the United States must embrace a multi-domain approach fusing sea, air, land, cyber, and space capabilities. Space-based sensors, like the Hypersonic and Ballistic Tracking Space Sensor, HBTSS, Constellation, aim to provide earlier warning of launches, extending reaction time. Advances in artificial intelligence and machine learning are being applied to fuse sensor data and accelerate fire control decisions. Electronic warfare platforms, both airborne and sea-based, are being upgraded to jam or spoof missile seekers, further complicating inbound threats. However, China's hypersonic development shows no signs of slowing. Next-generation weapons, such as the DF-27 anti-ship hypersonic cruise missile, are reportedly under development. By 2030, China could field dozens or even hundreds of hypersonics tailored for maritime targets. Under that projection, U.S. carriers would have to assume any forward deployment invites significant risk. This reality forces Washington to revisit whether deploying large carrier strike groups within range of Chinese shores is viable. For at least the next decade, carriers will likely remain central to U.S. naval doctrine. Yet their role and the way they operate will inevitably change. Instead of a single large formation steaming toward contested waters, carriers may operate as part of a more distributed force. Smaller mission packages of unmanned platforms will work alongside manned ships, complicating enemy targeting. Land-based fifth-generation fighters armed with extended-range munitions might shoulder much of the precision strike burden, using forward basing to achieve effects that once required carrier-based aircraft. Allied ships and coastal missile batteries could push a 2/AD zones farther away from China's shores, creating layered protective envelopes for high-value U.S. assets. Ultimately, the challenge posed by hypersonic weapons is more than a technological puzzle. It is a strategic inflection point demanding new approaches to deterrence, force posture, and alliance management. If the United States fails to adapt, its entire carrier fleet, and, by extension, its broader strategy for projecting power in the Indo-Pacific, could be rendered vulnerable by an adversary capable of striking with near impunity.